Thank you so much, Jen. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for another session here. Today, we're talking about premium New York State Riesling. I think why are we kind of leading with our first kind of breakout session on Riesling, and well, simply put, it's the state's most widely planted Vitis vinifera grape variety. It's grown in all the state's major AVAs. It has established itself as a flagship variety of the Finger Lakes region and has received national and international acclaim from all corners of the trade. We believe in the potential of this grape to be infinite. And with the flight that we have today, we hope to show the varying styles, approaches, terroir, and flavors that make New York State Riesling so special. Thrilled to be joined today by my friend Peter Weiss. Good to have you, Peter. And we're going to invite you into the conversation quite a bit throughout as we taste through and kind of talk about these wines. And as Jen said, please don't hesitate to put questions either into the chat box or the Q&A. I'm going to try and stay honest with our timing today and have some time for Q&A with Peter at the end. And so as we go through again, please don't hesitate to chime in. Okay, so let me get our presentation up here. Okay, share that. Everybody should be able to see this guy. Lovely. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. We've got our New York Riesling here. Just a quick kind of overview with our New York State map here. We have our 7 kind of major regions, AVAs. Finger Lakes is clearly the kind of epicenter for Riesling production. We'll kind of see that with our acreage numbers in the subsequent slides. But it really is a grape that can unite quite a few of our regions, particularly there is Riesling grown and vinified on Long Island, in the Hudson River region, in the Finger Lakes, in Lake Erie, in the Niagara, and I wouldn't doubt to find some in the Upper Hudson or Champlain Valley as well. And so, we have this cool climate region. It's a cool climate grape. It's a fantastic cool climate grape that can really do well in our climate and with our terroir, thanks to all those wonderful bodies of water that we discussed last week, particularly the lakes in the Finger Lakes, the Great Lakes for Niagara and Lake Erie, and then the proximity to the Atlantic Ocean, Long Island Sound for Long Island, and the Hudson River Valley. So yeah, we've got a great state that's doing really we've got exciting terroir. I kind of put this forward last week. This terroir should be celebrated, and one of the best things about Riesling is its ability to showcase that terroir. And so yeah, off we go. Okay, very kind of a high level, mile high overview here on the grape. Its origin is German. We have cool climate Riesling producing fresh, aromatic, age-worthy wines, light to medium body and racy acidity. Styles range from bone dry to very sweet. And really the key here is all about balance. And so you're going to hear me kind of continue to harp on balance as we go through our wines today. It is very important. In terms of sales and education and presenting for Riesling, this is a grape that I have been very passionate about since I got started in wine, honestly, since my very first trip up to the Finger Lakes. I was working in New York City, and I made a visit for a weekend. It was a winter wine weekend special. And I remember tasting the wines. It was March, and it was cold, and the lakes were cold, and the wine was cool and crisp and brilliant. It really was an opportunity for me to see the wine world very holistically, from the Riesling vines planted to the proximity of the lake, in the climate, in the glass with the winemaker. And so I've never really looked back. Your flavors are going to range from kind of more tart citrus fruits like limes and lemons, all the way through orchard fruits into stone fruits like peaches and apricots, all the way into tropical fruits. And as we kind of look at the different ways to produce Rieslings in different styles, we'll kind of touch on all those flavor points today, which is great. Again, we've got our principal AVAs here, Finger Lakes, Long Island, Lake Erie, but again, I would not discount Niagara Escarpment or Hudson River region for their Riesling production. Everybody's making some great wines. Again, you've got down at the bottom there, you've got your range of styles, right? From bone dry to dessert wine, and you have the International Riesling Foundation's taste profile on the bottom there, and you'll find that on the back of a lot of New York State Rieslings. And it's incredibly helpful. And so as we go through, I'm going to talk about that just a little bit more because I think it's important to understand the formula that's kind of going into that International Riesling Foundation scale. And so we're going to look at that a bit too. But I want to bring in Peter and talk a little bit more about kind of characteristics of Riesling and, might as well get it right from the winemaker's mouth. So Peter, how you doing, buddy?
Really good. How about you?
Good, man. And I'm sorry I missed you on my last trip up. I'm not sure where you were. Your man Joe was a wonderful host for us, though.
Yeah.
The wines are tasting great, man.
Yeah, thank you. I think I was at the Capitol doing a wine show for that weekend.
It's all right. I'm only mildly offended.
Yeah.
Good. So listen, I think just a good kind of point to start off at is really, I think that the wines, and specifically the wines of New York are just as much about the people as they are the juice in the glass. And so I do just want to just pick your brain. Jen kind of mentioned a bit about your journey to New York, and if you love Riesling so much, why didn't you just stay in Germany?
Yeah. Good question. You have to go, away from home to learn about home. And growing up in the Mosel River, I always knew, the hillsides are steep and a lot of work. But when you then are going to a different region where it's flat and it's not as hard, it's you actually realize it's much easier somewhere else. Why didn't you appreciate the hard work kind of? But yeah, 2006, that's when I ended up coming to New York, actually, specifically at Cuca Lake.
Okay, great. And so you spent some time working for other wineries before you guys set up shop, and you opened your winery, and it was 2016. Is that right?
Yeah, so 2016 was our first vintage with Weiss Vineyards, but we opened a tasting room, what it was, a one-room schoolhouse in January of 2017.
Excellent. Very good. What is it, really about New York State or the Finger Lakes more specifically that works so well for Riesling?
To me, for coming from the Mosel, it's the shales, the slate influence that really is that the Finger Lakes have, mostly everywhere, and then it's a cold climate, or specifically, the shorter season, and with going into harvest, the colder nights, it preserves the acidity that Riesling really, makes it so versatile. You can make great dry Rieslings, but then also, with nice high acidity, you can make some great sweet wines, and then, with some moisture in the fall, if it happens, we can have some nice botrytis dessert wines with that.
Yeah. So if you've not visited Weiss Vineyards yet, I highly encourage you do so. I always enjoy visiting because you built your production facility kind of into the hill a little bit. And so on the side, where there's still a bit of construction going on, you've got this really kind of excellent 12-foot cross section of the soils where you're digging in there. And it is just a beautiful kind of tapestry of that shale and that slate that you talked about. I always get to geek out on rocks when I go to visit you. My last visit was no exception. Everyone was just kind of digging around, and it really is incredible soil for Riesling in particular. The drainage is exceptional. We're talking about these really, really thin kind of visible layers where your roots are going to be able to really work their way down into the soils and the stone there. And if I recall, is it a bit of iron in the soil there too?
Yeah, so that's when I was first digging, our first building, and I got really excited. I found layers of shale, slate, and they were nice and hard. I collected 2 pallets of those to make some walkways, and then a week later they were brittle. They came pretty much to air, and the iron and the shale are really oxidized, and it's not as hard as it appeared after 1 week on the air.
Right. And so shale is essentially just young slate, right? With more time and pressure, shale becomes slate. Is that accurate? Is that my understanding?
Yeah, that's what I heard too. I wasn't there in the process, but that's what I learned as well.
All right, good. And let's see. So when typically does Riesling ripen throughout the growing season? What's that journey like in the Finger Lakes in terms of like kind of timing when you see veraison, things like that? Or not that, I'm sorry, but just phenolic ripeness and
in average, this year, I now have to see. So like mid-May is usually when Riesling in average comes out, like throughout the Finger Lakes. Some lakes are earlier and a little bit later. Seneca Lake is usually a little bit earlier than Skinny Atlas Lake and Keuka Lake, because we are a little bit higher, a little bit colder. But I would say in average, mid-May, about break, and then around June, mid-June is when we get into the flower with Riesling and veraison. That's like end of August, and then picking mid of October to end of October in an average. Because some years you have either going towards later or a little bit earlier. But like the cold nights in the Finger Lakes, I prefer later years, because then you get the cold nights and during harvest, it actually gets you preserves the acidity that I like on Riesling.
New York has this reputation for being a difficult place to grow vinifera fruit. Do you believe that to be true?
Only for the winters, because you have that you have to do that exercise of hilling up the grafts. So if there's a harsh winter, you have the vines survive. Besides that, it's not much different than to the Mosel River, where I grew up.
In terms of Riesling, what low temperature do you start to sweat a little bit?
So I start sweating when I see -Fahrenheit, just because you don't know how it dips at night. They say -5, but it could happen to -14. It's a prediction, you never know. But like -10, that's where you're starting sweating a little bit more. So that's where and then also it doesn't matter, if it's there's difference in temperature and timings. So -10 and or like when it's January, when when it's been cold a long time, it's different than -10 in beginning of March, because the vines are in a different stage. In a different stage, there's different hardiness of the buds.
Right. So it's kind of like when that sap starts flowing a little bit and the vine starts to relax. When a cold snap happens, then that's when there's trouble.
Yeah.
Okay, great. How many different expressions of Riesling do you produce?
Good question. Like all of them. Well, a lot of them, and we basing it off the Mosel style, or like when I say German style. We do our regular dry Riesling, semi-dry, and then we have a KSA. So K for Kabinett, Spätlese, S for Spätlese, and A for Auslese. We have a couple more coming to pipe. TBA, Trocken Bärenauslese, and of course we have our ice wine. And in the future we're going to have also like a Bärenauslese.
Great. I think it's actually, since we have a German here, and the German labeling systems tends to confuse and confound even the most staunch Riesling drinkers. And so when we talk about cabinet, what is the actual definition of cabinet? Because different producers will use this on their labels. You know, you abbreviate it to a K, fantastic. But what can people expect from those wines?
Usually, so like I said, it's confusing, and each cabinet for each winery has their own style. So if you drink a Weiss cabinet, you know which style you expect. So traditionally, it's lower alcohol and balanced by having a nice sippy acidity with a low pH. So that sweetness that's in the cabinet is just nicely balanced, and it's just wonderful to drink. It's just light because it's lighter alcohol, and yeah, quite delicious.
Mm-hmm. So, and then from cabinet we move into Spätlese. Is that correct?
Yeah, Spätlese and ours, traditionally the sweetness level in the wine getting higher. And like getting more ripe components and just like higher sweetness levels.
Sure. And is that specifically because we've let the grapes hang longer? Is it essentially the loose definition for Spätlese I've understood to be late harvest? Is that accurate, or
it is accurate with some exception. You're going into Auslese and Bernos and TBA Auslese, then you're getting also some influencing sometimes of botrytis. Botrytis in there, there's a different ripeness, different. You get different influences and different ways how to produce sugar. Usually Cabernet and Spätlese is produced mainly through for the vines. When you come into botrytis, botrytis evaporates the water, and then through that you get the concentration of sugar, but also acidity, and get a little bit of side components of glycerin from the noble rot.
Great. Okay, so thank you for that. Excellent kind of little deep dive. We've got more to go. I want to talk just a minute on that International Riesling Foundation scale. I've got some notes here. And ultimately, the formula is going to plot you between dry, medium sweet, and sweet. And many of New York State's Rieslings will use this scale to distinguish across the different styles. And so based on the IRF guidelines, it's all about the interplay, right, of sugar, acidity, and pH, right? And so the winemakers can then use the formula to calculate the place where the carat on the profile is going to land, ultimately to help consumers choose a Riesling that best matches their taste. And I think it's just, again, it's important to drive home sugar's role in Riesling, because so many people just consumers believe that all Riesling is sweet, and that's simply not true, right? And so for me, I've always kind of taken it back to this kind of concept of balance, right? Of a balance of sugar and acid. You can have residual sugar, but if your acid is balanced in the right way, then you won't be left heavy, sticky, cloying. You're going to be left bright, you're going to be left fresh, you're going to be left acidic, you're going to be left salivating, ready for more wine, ready for a bite of food. And it doesn't really need to be said, but Riesling is obviously fantastic as a food pairing wine as well. And so when you look at this International Riesling Foundation scale, and if you're working with a winery that does utilize it or something similar, make sure your consumers understand that there's a lot more going on than just sugar. Right. And even if there is sugar, it's if the winemaker knows what they're doing, you're going to have this balance of sugar and acid. And so all the best ones are going to leave you fresh, leave you salivating, leave you ready for more. Fantastic. Let's keep going. We are on to viticulture and vinification. And so just some, again, broad strokes here, and we'll pick Peter's brain a little bit. But, the Riesling is one of the most cold hardy vinifera varieties. The clusters are compact with small berries, greenish yellow skins. This variety's ability to retain acidity through the late stages of ripening allows it to maintain a balance of flavor in concentrated late harvest styles. That's another important point. Riesling is always acidic, right? And that's one of the best things. It always has this really brilliant acidity, even if you're letting it go really long into the growing season and you have these late harvest or even dessert styles, that acid is still ripping. And that's really important. And it's one of the reasons that we need that residual sugar. I think residual sugar is important for Riesling. It's going to unlock a lot of those fruit characteristics that we know and love there. Further, excellent dessert wines are made when the grape is affected by noble rot, which is a mold. It's called Botrytis cinerea, or if it's allowed to simply dehydrate, it starts to shrivel and kind of get raisinated, or going as far as to freezing on the vine. And we'll go more into those kind of dessert styles with Peter when we taste that last wine, which I'm very excited about. Okay, on to onto vinification. You have cool to cold fermentations in stainless steel tanks, again, to preserve those delicate aromatic flavors. The aromatic profile on Riesling is just one of the greatest things in the world, in my humble opinion, and that should be protected. And so that is probably the most popular way of vinifying. But again, often aged in stainless steel and occasionally aged in neutral oak. But we are seeing large puncheons, large oak formats increasing in popularity. Same thing as lees aging for texture. And you go to many of the kind of classic old world Riesling regions, and you're seeing these very large format oak barrels that have been around for decades. And so we're not imparting oak flavor, we're just imparting neutral kind of textural components. And we're seeing more of that throughout New York State producers. On the right here, we've got our acreage listed from the 2011 USDA report. As everyone knows, New York is pretty desperate for some new vineyard data, and so hopefully we'll get that soon. But you've got Finger Lakes leading the pack with about 1,000 acres. Long Island has about 60 acres, Lake Erie 42, Hudson Valley just under 10, Upper Hudson as well, Niagara Escarpment, Champlain Valley, and so and another kind of 60 acres kicking about the state. And so we're over 1,000 acres easily in the state, and we do believe that these numbers have increased quite significantly over the last decade with new plantings, which is great. And so the majority of New York State Rieslings are fermented with. Okay, here's a question, Peter. Before I have this note here, and it's I want to just kind of sense check it. Do you believe that most producers are using commercial yeast strains with their Rieslings?
Yes, I believe so, and we as well. So we are a relatively young winery. Started our cellars in 2016. So until I have all my ducks in a row, I should say, or I have my crush facility or crush pad set up how I want to have it set up, leave it a couple of years, and then until I build my own yeast strength, and then in the future I'm going to do more with wild yeast. But at home, as the cellar for my dad, it's been for 100 years. You know what you get. So here, just a little bit more careful, just at the beginning, and until I'm getting more comfortable with what I have in house.
Great. And we're seeing more programs that are including those ambient fermentations or indigenous fermentations. We're seeing more cold soaking, lees aging, and again, those larger oak formats. Given the site-specific nature of Finger Lakes vineyards in particular, but of course across all of New York State's vineyards, we are seeing more potential for single vineyard sites and microsites, the top kind of Ludites in the Finger Lakes and beyond. And I think these unique sites are producing Rieslings that are just showing, not only the extraordinary variation of soil types, but also just kind of the specificity of our terroir. Peter, are you working with anything that's site specific?
Yeah, so I have around 20 growers getting grapes from Five Finger Lakes, from Canandaigua to Skaneateles Lake. So that's where I can work vintage variation. I don't have an estate. Well, I don't have a single vineyard Riesling yet, but well, I put a name on it. But most of my styles of K and A usually come from the same vineyard. So from year to year, you have the same vineyard.
Excellent. Where are we going to take Riesling next? What is there more frontier to explore for Riesling in New York State? What does the future look like? That's a tough question.
So what's the future look like? I cannot tell you, but one thing I do want people to know when we talk about Riesling, so they know it is versatile. I think the average producer still thinks Riesling is sweet, and Riesling can be sweet, a great sweet Riesling, but there's also great dry Riesling, and that's where I kind of want the consumer to know.
Excellent. Okay, let's keep going. I think we're into our wine flight. Absolutely here. And so wine number one, we are on Long Island. This is produced by Wolfer Estate. The wine is called the Grapes of Roth. Roman Roth is our winemaker. That's his mother on the label there. Mother or grandmother? No, mother. Yep, his mother. And this is the 2020 vintage that we have here. These guys do utilize the International Riesling Foundation scale, and it's plotted squarely right in the center of the dry bracket there. And I've got some more tech notes to share with you. But let's go ahead. Let's get in there. Let's give it a swirl. Give it a smell. Alcohol coming in at 11.8%. Nice and sessionable. Lovely aromatics on that. I'm going to grab my tech notes from here. Yeah, fantastic. So we have 100% Riesling here, sourced from Osprey's Dominion and the former Peconic Bay Vineyard. This is all on the North Fork of Long Island. We have a fantastic 2020 vintage. We've got warmer weather building up in June to a record-breaking hot August. And then an unusually long and cool and dry September for giving us extensive hang time. That's ace right there. And so nearly no morning dew, and so very healthy skins, kept while the grapes are ripening. And then September and October, beautifully sunny, but on the cooler side, so preserving that wonderful acidity that Peter was mentioning. And handpicked on September 27th and October 1st. Grapes were destemmed, crushed, and gently pressed. Juice was settled and carefully racked, followed by a slow stainless steel fermentation at a maximum of 63 degrees, lasting 30 days. Matured for 5 months on the fine lees and was filtered in the beginning of March and bottled in March 12th of 2021. And so our residual sugar here is 4 grams per liter. So again, quite dry. And again, that alcohol is 11.8. We've got some serving suggestions for pairings. I always like to share these, especially when they come from the producer. I obviously have my own ideas, but they recommend pairing with buttery shellfish, rich and earthy soups, creamed sauce chicken or mushroom dishes. That sounds great. And then spicy Asian dishes, as well as aged cheeses. And yeah, I'd love to see some cheese with this wine for sure. Peter, what do you think?
It's quite delicious. And I have to tell you, it's the first Riesling I drink from Long Island. Just not that I not drinking a lot of wine. I just just haven't been there yet.
Well, as we know, there's not a lot out of it. There's not a lot of it out there. This was only 675 cases. Generally, it's small production when it comes to Riesling outside of the Finger Lakes. So don't feel bad.
That's well made. I like the texture mid palate.
Yeah, I think that for me, I've always kind of looked to that mid palate for a better understanding of that balance of sugar and acid, right? I think when you're always going to get that hit of acid right at the tip of your tongue. You know, if we talk about kind of the journey that wine takes on your palate, you always pick up that acidity right at the tip of your tongue. And then it gets in the sides. But as the wine kind of washes over your mid palate, you know, that's when the sugar kicks in and gives you those riper fruit characteristics. If we didn't have any residual sugar in this wine, it would be like sucking on a lime, right? You know, like, you know, or even the lime zest. And so I think all those really nicer, riper fruit characteristics that we have here are just all about that balance of leaving in a bit of residual sugar. And I think that that makes a whole lot of difference. So let's see. Oh, so Peter, I saw a question come in. It says we might have some beautiful Weiss sparkling wines on the way.
Yes, so we are going to have some sparkling wines that I made in 2017. So they're still resting on the lease. We haven't touched them yet. So maybe something for Christmas, maybe something next spring. So not sure. We have our sparkling that infused carbonated. We're starting in 2017. With me being German, I had to have bubbles. In Germany, we drink the most sparkling in the world, 24.5 liters, I believe, last time I looked. And it starts young when we drink sparkling water. But yeah, so there's some traditional method on the way.
Excellent. And are you using Riesling for any of that production?
Yes, so the plan was yes. So I was going to do Riesling Sekt in 2017, but I ended up needed that grape for still wine, and I don't have any Riesling on the way, but I have Blanc de Noir, Zweigelt Rosé, and some Pinot Noir.
Excellent. In about 2 weeks' time, we're doing the session on New York State sparkling wines, and we will be showing a 100% Riesling sparkling, which I'm very excited about. And I think it's a category that the Finger Lakes and New York should continue to explore. We have a wonderful reputation for sparkling wines, and so we should expand upon that and marry that with our kind of flagship white grape variety in the Finger Lakes. And so, yeah, I'm very excited to see more Riesling sparklings, both traditional method or otherwise. I think we've got some good stuff. That's great. Any last thoughts on this wine, Peter?
It's a nice example for a good Riesling. You know, it doesn't matter where it's made. You know, you probably can tell better, you know, if it's reflecting Long Island, but you know, it's well made.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you know, we're working with sandy soils that are well draining. We're working with the maritime influence. It's got great acid. I'm just salivating like crazy. It feels and it's really nice and juicy on the palate. And I think it's a great example of cool climate wine coming in again under 12%. And that's a sweet spot, pun intended. All right. Let's continue on again, ladies and gentlemen. If anyone has any questions that they'd like to share, please don't hesitate to put them into the chat box or the Q&A so that we can have some time with them at the end. Okay, moving along. I'm actually going to show a quick video as we're going to introduce Finger Lakes, and I always just like hearing from as many voices as possible, and it also just gives me a minute to stop talking. And so I'm going to share a video with you. And this is coming straight from the streets of New York City, where I got to spend some time with my friend Thomas Pastizak. And so let's see, that should come up for everybody now. Oh boy. Let's see. What's a password? Screen. And here we go. Can everybody hear that okay? Peter, can you hear that?
I would say, in terms of what's happening in the Finger Lakes, it's exciting. It's a unique, cool climate region. There's not a lot of places in the United States that can really express themselves as being true, cool climate regions that sort of champion a fresher, brighter style of wine that's made by the fact that you have these dramatic steep pitch slopes that hug the Finger Lakes themselves. We're able to make wines that are very mineral-driven, very racy, but at the same time very refreshing and meant for the table. I'd say one of the most compelling things about Riesling being made in the Finger Lakes is the fact that there is no established style. When you think of Riesling coming from the Mosel Valley and Mosel River in Germany, if you're thinking about Riesling coming from the Wachau in Austria, there are more definitive styles that people associate. But New York and Finger Lakes specifically, it's such a young viticultural region. There's much more experimentation. There's much more differentiation of styles. Some people are making bone-dry Rieslings, and some are focusing on dessert styles. Some folks are making sparkling wine. They're all being made in the region, and particularly with Riesling, a lot of the techniques from the old world are being implemented. Skin contact when crushing, long cold fermentations using spontaneous fermentation, indigenous yeast, aging the wines in a combination of old oak barrels as well as stainless steel, and bottling the wines with minimal sulfur or extended lees contact. So there are a lot of techniques that the Finger Lakes is implementing that you'll see from a smattering of regions in Europe where Riesling has its home, but all of this is happening in one region in upstate New York.
Okay, and we're back. Thomas was, if you don't know him personally, a wonderful guy and one of the kind of original amplifiers for New York State wine, particularly New York State Riesling. And he now has two labels, both Terrassen and then Empire Estate, and making some great wines. And yeah, and so he was one of the top sommeliers. I still consider him a top sommelier, but now he's with a distributor. He's a sales rep, and he's doing great work and in New York City. And so let's move on to our Finger Lakes Riesling here. And we have our Forge Cellars. This is the dry Riesling Classique. This is Finger Lakes. This is all Seneca Lake fruit. The vintage is also 2020, and our ABV is coming in at 12.5%. Got it here. Okay. No International Riesling Foundation scale on the back. That's okay. But we do have a bit of some tasting notes, as well as some soil notes, harvest dates, residual sugar. I do love a very descriptive back label, particularly when it comes to Riesling, because again, there's just so much misinformation, misconception out in the world that I think the more transparency that we can offer, I think the better. And so this is their kind of flagship dry Riesling. So multiple sites on Seneca Lake. And these guys do an extensive program where they are exploring kind of single vineyard sites and those different terroir expressions. And so this is their kind of broad Seneca Lake example. And I think the most interesting bit here is that this wine goes through spontaneous fermentation in barrel. Okay. And it gives it some really unique characteristics. So I get in there and give it a smell. Peter, have you had this wine before?
Yes. A couple of weeks ago, we visited a forge with our team.
Peter, I'm so sorry. I lost my audio. So just if I can have just one moment to see if I can fix this. You speak again for me, buddy?
Yes. So can you hear me?
So quiet. As soon as I played that video, I seem to have lost my audio. We didn't have this problem last week. I'm just going to stop my screen share for a minute.
Maybe do you think it's me?
Oh, there we go.
I can hear you, Peter.
Okay, there we go. We're back. Sorry, no, it was definitely my fault. The video program just stole my audio control, so I apologize for that, everybody. That's totally just me. Peter, I didn't hear what your answer was. Have you had this wine before?
Yes, I had it a couple of weeks ago. It was the last time we visited with our Weiss team, Forge Cellars.
Great.
And just
And
just,
Go
just
ahead.
how I remembered it. It's a nice like I get yellow fruits, with notes of barrel aging, and still nice, vibrant for like a nice food wine.
I think you get a lot just kind of textural differences from that oak. And I don't actually recall if there's any percentage of new oak in there. It'd be very little, if any.
I think so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe second fill barrel, something like that. But texturally, you just get a much more kind of creamier mouthfeel. And then you get a bit of that kind of, you could tell it's just a bit more oxidized than from a steel tank ferment, and is really quite pleasant. And so some more notes for this wine. The soils is gravelly loam with clay and shale and limestone, very typical for Seneca Lake. And I do believe that all of these sites are on the east side of Seneca Lake, where the winery is. Harvest dates mid-October, between the 14th and the 28th, so mid to late October. So good hang time on that 2020 vintage there for sure. Residual sugar, 0.31% or 3.1 grams per liter. And our total acidity at 6.3 grams. Alcohol 12.5. Their tasting notes include mandarin, orange, and cardamom, which I really like. I like they went after that herbaceous note that a lot of people don't talk about. I think when it comes to Riesling, a lot of what's discussed is always the fruit and then minerality, and that minerality is always a tricky kind of stone to turn, I guess. And so when I think when you can really pick out some of those herbaceous notes, you can really unlock a lot of the pairing potential for these wines too. And so I see cardamom and I start thinking Indian food, right? And so I'm also here in London. Indian food quite prolific. I probably eat it once a week, maybe once every other week. And there's nothing like a good well-made Riesling for pairing with that spice, right? You've got that heat that's coming from these Asian cuisines, and that bit of residual sugar does a really nice job of kind of tempering that heat and makes it quite welcoming from a pairing perspective. And then that acid's going to be there to clean up all that fat on your palate. Fat is heavy, fat weighs your palate down. The acidity comes in, lifts that fat up off your palate, breaks it down, rinses down nice, gets you salivating, gets you ready for your next bite, your next sip, so on and so forth. Anything else you'd like to share, Peter? Should we move on?
Yeah, Dan. So one thing I need to do now. Cardamom is a new word for me and a new spice. So I guess I may have it before, but I have to specifically look in that one now and
Sure.
pair it with some Forge Classic.
There you go. Yep. Very good. Yeah, they use it. Yeah, it's probably it's popular in Indian cuisine, but you'll see it about. So I use it in baking a lot too. It's a good baking spice. It's very kind of exotic, I guess. I don't know. Very good. Let's keep moving on. Unfortunately, Peter, you don't have this wine, but I'm lucky I had my samples shipped over for a previous project, largely the education guide and the videos. And so we have the Nostrano 2021. This is their semi-sweet Riesling. And so we wanted to show an off-dry style before we go into the fully fledged dessert stuff. And I think that off-dry, semi-dry, semi-sweet is a popular category for New York State Riesling. It might not be taken the most seriously, but it is certainly some of the most beloved, right? And also makes for just a really wonderful pairing opportunities for these wines. Again, that residual sugar going a long way to unlocking flavors and expanding what you can really do with it in terms of your practical applications. I did get this image of the grapes from the producer from my friends at Nostrano. And so this is some 2021 vintage fruit that you're seeing there. Their little montage they put together every year, and it is some good looking fruit. We are all Hudson River region here. And I'm looking for my notes. Apologies. I'm looking for the harvest date. I believe it was the end of September. And I've got it right here. Okay, and so wine number 3. Yep, the harvest date was September 30th in 2021. Peter, broadly speaking, I know your experience will be a little bit more Finger Lakes than New York statewide, but 2021 was very different to 2020. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, like I couldn't be more true. So 2020 was a winemaker's dream kind of. The grapes were perfect. You didn't have to do much. You didn't have to worry too much. And then they came 21. So it's like 2021 was quite different. You got rain. You got a good start. Then you got a lot of rain while the vines were in the bloom and like in cell growth. So there was great condition for cell growth, and ended up a watery and cold harvest. So there was a lot of grapes, and you had to put a lot of effort into to harvest clean grapes. Potentially also like then had to also sort and a lot of grapes. So quite different years there in the Finger Lakes. I don't know how Hudson Valley was.
Yeah, I think the takeaway is that New York State experiences quite a bit of vintage variation. That's across all the regions. I've been going around and I've been interviewing winemakers for all these videos and things, and I always ask, what's a typical vintage like? And I always get a lot of laughs in my face because there's no such thing as a typical vintage in New York. There's an ideal vintage, sure. But we have both the blessing and the curse that is vintage variation across most of our major regions. And I say blessing and a curse, but because it keeps you on your toes, right? It makes that your good winemakers and your good vineyard managers are going to rise to the top. You ask the question kind of in turn and say, what gets you out of bed every day? And the winemakers always say it's the vintage variations, because no year is the same year after year. And so you're always waking up every day to a new challenge and a new approach. And that's really what makes New York State wines exciting. And so, there can be reliable sameness to some producers' wines, where you will get something very consistent year after year after year, especially in regions where there is vintage consistency. Mendoza, Argentina comes to mind. But I think that if we really romantic about wine, which so many people are, you talk about the grape's ability to showcase both place and time, right? And so I think the winemaker is a wonderful kind of translator for vintage variation. Exciting, the next update for the reference guide for the PDF it should be released any minute now, and we included a dozen years worth of vintage reports for the Finger Lakes. And so I hope to continue to expand that into other regions as I get access to the firsthand information. But really excited to launch from, I believe, 2010 or 11 all the way through 2022. And so no scores or anything like that, or kind of judgments on the vintages. Just here's what happened and how we dealt with it, right? And so that's pretty cool. 11.5%. Really nice nose, pretty clean. I'm not getting a ton of kind of sapid, kind of sticky fruit, despite being, this semi-sweet. Honestly, I'm getting some kind of green herbs, herbaceousness, which is great. Comes from that cool climate, makes perfect sense. That cool vintage rather makes perfect sense. And then texturally, it comes in, you go, there is the 32 grams of residual sugar, and that is a huge jump up from 3.1 grams on the last wines, 10 times the amount of residual sugar. However, I would never in a million years say that this wine is 10 times as sweet. It's not the thing, right? It might be twice as sweet. It is definitely sweeter, sure, but man, the balance is there. I'm salivating. That's what's making it difficult to talk. I'm not sticky. I'm not heavy. I'm not cloying. But texturally, it's like juice. It's nectar. I mean, it is really quite just pleasurable on your palate. I think this for me is cheese wine right here. This could work with so many different cheeses, from rich triple creams through to kind of maybe a younger Comté would be brilliant. You could do so much with this. One of my favorite cheeses called Hallahacker. It's an Alpine style similar to Comté, but does really well when you kind of bring in more kind of sugar to the equation. It's already a bit of a bit candied fruit on the with the cheese, and so you kind of heighten all that. Really nice clean fruit. Yeah, and there's even with the acidity is quite drying, right? Which is nice, and it's got some minerality in that acid. It's really a lovely wine, really quite good. I'm sorry you didn't get it. Hopefully your sample will show up soon.
Yeah.
Very good.
Then one thing, even I don't have the wine, what I want to say was the 2021 vintage. To me, even was a little bit challenging, but it was rewarding. To me, the 21 vintage, because it was a colder climate, is like more reflecting than the 2020. So like I like that sippy acidity. That's where our Riesling, like for Weiss, our Riesling style, fresh, clean, and living off the acidity kind of year was.
Yeah, often those cooler vintages end up giving us a lot more longevity in our Rieslings too, where they might be a bit of a sleeper out of the gate, but they're going to have a lot of lasting staying power. I've been very fortunate to taste Finger Lakes Rieslings going back to the 1980s, and they showed just as well as any other 40-year-old wine. And so I think it'll be exciting as our programs kind of continue to mature to see again the kind of staying power of these wines.
And then so yesterday I was participating in the Riesling camp, and yesterday evening's dinner we had vintage variations, and like the year 2020 was to 2021. Reminded me, yesterday I had one from Thirsty Owl Riesling. It was a 2009 versus a 2010, and it was the same years. 2009 was colder, bright acidity, and then the 2010 was to that date I think one of the hottest that has been in the Finger Lakes. Those are some fun to see like right next to each other. And then now having the opportunity to taste some that are a little bit older, being aging.
That's great. I said we were going to stay right on time, and here we are. It never happens. So I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce our last wine, and then I will very quickly wrap up with some closing points. If you do have questions for Peter, now's the time, and I will promise to work them in efficiently as possible.
I mean, so here we have our 2019 ice wine. That was my second ice wine I made in the Finger Lakes. And that was one of the years. 2019 was some more grapes, and I wasn't planning on it. It was one of the things a grower came up to me. He had some extra Riesling hanging, and the cold came by surprise. So we harvest them mid-November. Okay, so I just had a look on back of the bottle. You actually see the data. We picked them. I just know it was early. So it was November 13th, and yeah, that's quite early. And one of the things for ice wines, like in my opinion, the early ice wines that are picked, because the weather gives you a choice. It was, I think, minus 12, 14 degrees for a couple of days, but so early. So it was the first frost, a deep frost the grapes had. So there was no thawing and thawing, like freezing, thawing for a long time. Like the great condition came right at the right time, early. So there was no botrytis yet. So these grapes were 100% clean, no botrytis, and in the early stage for the first freeze. I think that to me makes the best iced wines. Where now looking back, my friends in Germany, they're kind of jealous in a way because with climate change, they don't have the opportunities to have the cold events anymore. They might sometimes have to wait until February if it even happens.
Yeah, good luck keeping your fruit clean into February. That's tall order. And so approximately residual sugar on this wine?
It's around 170 grams, so 17%.
Yep.
And the acidity, I don't recall, but it's still quite sippy. So it gives it a nice balance acidity sweetness level.
I mean, the nose is exceptional. It's so cool. I don't know if people saw. I did. I pulled my just kind of vacuum stopper out of this bottle. I opened this a long time ago. I opened this at the end of January, and I've kept it vacuum stoppered in my refrigerator, and it is as fresh as the day I opened it. Really, the staying power on these wines. I mean, sugar being a preservative, acidity being a preservative, these wines are indestructible. And so, when you have these ice wines or these botrytis driven dessert wines, your yield, the amount of fruit that you need to make such a small amount of this kind of a really concentrated nectar, let's call it. It is the reason that the prices are what they are for these wines. However, I mean, with this kind of staying power, the ageability, and then just the applications for enjoying these wines, just spectacular, man. This is a great wine. And this one awards in the classic, yeah.
Yes, this one got double gold in the classic, and I believe Parker gave it 95 points.
Well deserved.
Thank you. And it's one of the wines that you can, like people say, how long can you hold it? 20 years, no problem. And when I bottled it, I did the same thing. What my grandfather used to do, bottling big formats like magnums. Just to be able to age it even longer, whereas the cork of a magnum is the same size than of the small 375. So it gets the same oxygen intake. So then in 20 years, 30 years, when we open it, just or even 50 years, then you can really see how ice wine can age.
I'll see you there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Really beautiful example of a dessert wine, and it's another category that we can kind of just continue to drive into. You're getting different characteristics from the grapes, whether they're raisinated, whether they're frozen, whether they're botrytis affected, and it's a big category to play with. And so I encourage everyone to continue to explore those styles because man, they are special. They are special. We did the kind of sustainability overview last week, but I did just want to again just shout about it. Sustainability incredibly important for New York State and our future, and so please get involved. We believe that sustainability is really just the minimum that you can be doing and putting forward to have a long-lasting business, keep up the good work there, New York State. We didn't get any more questions coming through. We are right at 10 a.m. Or 3 p.m. for me. But if anyone does have any questions, please don't hesitate to jump in while I leave you with a few closing thoughts. There's a value proposition to New York State Riesling. They offer incredible value. We can boast a wide breadth of styles with the signatures of a world-class cool climate region. We've got fresh, lively wines, moderate alcohol, lots of flavor. They're perfect for the table. premium Rieslings from around the world or the West Coast, ours are quite friendly to the average consumer. And with the overwhelming majority of our producers being small and family owned, you're getting a artisan product rooted in unique and fascinating terroir. And I'm going to end all of these webinars with that statement, because I think that is our value proposition. Price aside, you're getting something that's special, and it's really, again, it's rooted in unique and fascinating terroir. So, for further study, I also encourage people to explore additional premium Riesling styles from around the world, particularly German wines, Alsatian wines, Austrian Rieslings, Australian Rieslings. There's a big wide world of Riesling out there that's everything can kind of give you something a little different. And again, you want to do terroir study. It's one of the best grapes to do it with. And then just the last few points. New York State's cool climate regions have solidified themselves as the highest echelon of Riesling production areas. I'm counting us with Alsace and with the Mosel and with the Eden Valley and Clare Valley in Australia, some of the world's best. And we're only getting stronger. We're young, we're scrappy. We've got a lot to look forward to. And so we've got more Riesling planted in New York State than any other Vitis vinifera grape, with acreage on the rise. The Rieslings are once again terroir driven. They bear the mark of specific vineyard sites and individual winemakers who understand balance. And our wines are fantastic with food. Our Rieslings are so good with food. And with the spectrum of styles from bone dry to opulent dessert bottles, there's really something for everyone and every meal. And so if you ever just want to talk about pairing applications for Riesling, man, I could go on all day. And so there's a lot of fun to be had with this grape. And again, let's just continue to show people what New York State Riesling can do. It's really exciting. Peter, I don't have any questions.